The budget committee is beginning in under an hour. I know that we've got many people signed up to give public comment, and this is essentially a way for us to come together as a community, as a movement. I know a lot of us have been building the movement to tax big business, and then especially recently with just the explosion of the protests around justice for George Floyd and the real energy of tens of thousands of people now demanding that significant money, significant portions of the $410 million Seattle Police Department budget be transferred away from that, repressive apparatus and towards community needs. We, of course, people will be aware that just yesterday, our movement, on the strength of well over 100 people calling in and demanding that tear gas, chemical weapons, other quote unquote crowd controlled weapons be banned, also chokeholds. We were able, our movement, to win that and overcoming significant opposition from City Council and efforts to delay. But right now we want to focus on the discussion, as Shama was indicating, to really get as much as possible from big business during this budget committee by taxing them to the maximum possible to build social housing, to fund community needs, Green New Deal programs. And so let's go ahead now, and I want to pass it back to Shama to be able to begin to orient our movement. Of course, this is, it's been long discussed how we can tax Amazon and how we can get community needs, but every day, every week, there's new developments that occur, new ways that the establishment, especially in the face of such a big movement, tries to confuse ordinary people, confuse our movement, tries to push back in very confusing ways. So let's go ahead and see if Shama, Councilmember Sawant can give us a little bit of context before then we go into some of the more finer points that people can bring up, hear from activists like Emily MacArthur, and really focus our point of attack as much as possible to pressure City Council. So Shama, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know this was at short notice, especially after so many of us fought for the historic bills that we were able to win through our movement and through my Socialist Council office on a chemical weapons ban and crowd control weapons ban and the ban on using police using chokeholds. So, we really fought for that. And I know people must be exhausted, but this is an incredible moment that we're in, not only in Seattle, but nationwide and globally, with this uprising of young people, as Adam was saying, that just sort of erupted on the basis of long-standing issues on racism and police violence, because those issues are endemic to the capitalist system itself, but most immediately triggered by the brutal murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. But today is extremely important as well. No votes will be taken by the City Council in today's committee, but today's committee is extremely important because today we have to make our voices heard and let the establishment politicians know that we are not done building our movement. In fact, we have just begun. And that if politicians are going to say Black Lives Matter and that they care about marginalized communities, then they need to join us in pushing for the maximum possible, the strongest possible policy to raise big business taxes so that we can begin to address the racist gentrification in our city. For that, we need revenues to build social housing, which is publicly owned, affordable housing. Because what we've seen in the last 10 years is that when housing is a commodity in a profit-making market, then apartments are built for profits for the property developers, the property management corporations, the big landlords, and the big banks that underwrite the loans for those big building projects. That housing is not built for affordability. So it's no coincidence that in the same period of the last 10 years, since the Great Recession, since the 2008 Great Recession, when housing has boomed, construction has boomed in Seattle. Seattle has been the construction crane capital of the nation for 4 years. Yet in that same time, it's no coincidence that housing has become less affordable. And on the whole, the working class in Seattle, the workers who make this city run, the teachers, the custodial workers, the sanitation workers, the librarians, you name it, those people are feeling the pinch of the skyrocketing rent. But most disproportionately, who is paying the price for this housing affordability crisis? It's our marginalized communities who also face the brunt of police violence. So it's communities of color, which includes Black, Brown, Indigenous communities. It also means poor people are targeted both by the housing affordability crisis and by police brutality. It's people who are facing mental illness, other problems that are stemming from social problems. And we need to make sure that we continue fighting for a city that actually works for ordinary people, which means fighting against police violence, fighting to defund the police, and fighting for the largest possible tax on big businesses so that we can even begin to address the problems in our society. Just to clarify this morning's public comment, if you've signed up to speak at 10 a.m., then please know that the morning session will focus on big business taxes, not on defunding the police. There will be a separate session in the afternoon at 2 p.m. You can speak on defund. You can speak on defund right now as well, but this is our opportunity to focus on the big business taxes and make that connection. Why is it that our movement is fighting against gentrification? Why is it that we're fighting for rent control? Why is it that we're fighting for social housing? Because this is very much connected to the racist policies and the racist agenda of the system itself. And that's why alongside defund, we also have to fight for the Amazon tax. I'm just saying that because the afternoon session of the city council meeting will focus on defund, I would suggest that our public comment at 2 p.m. focus on defund exclusively. And now we focus on tax Amazon for the 10 a.m. public comment. So, as I was saying earlier, our movement against racism and police violence truly made history. And we forced a unanimous city council vote on our bill to make Seattle truly, this is amazing. We made Seattle the nation's first city to have a comprehensive ban on police use or purchase of all the horrendous, the barbaric weapons that they have used and they recently used against the movement, including tear gas, mace, pepper spray, rubber bullets, all those weapons they say they need for crowd control. But really what we know is that they use it unprovoked by the movement in order to quash social movements. We also want a ban on chokeholds being used by the police. So it's no question that is only the first step, but it was a historic first step. And the fact that the establishment was forced to vote on that is a sign that our movement is having a huge impact. Because any of you watching the meeting on Monday, and Emily MacArthur, who's going to speak after me, is going to go more into detail in this, so I won't focus too much on it. But the point is that if you watch the meeting on Monday, you will know how much the establishment fought us tooth and nail, even on this bill just to ban chemical weapons. As if, it was such a, I had this horrible feeling where I thought, do we really need to, are we living in a society where we need to convince politicians who say they're progressive that no, we shouldn't be using barbaric weapons against our own constituents? I had this moment where I felt, what kind of, political system do we have? And it was, for me, and I hope for everybody who's listening here, it was a moment of clarification that, my God, you can't trust the establishment even on this small historic thing, let alone something bigger and historic like the Amazon tax, like defunding the police by at least 50%. And so I'm really looking forward to Emily's points on that as well. But all of this shows that we have incredible momentum. So like I said, my office will be fighting and is fighting for defunding the police by at least 50%. We need to include, as part of that policy, there's going to be many components to make it so that the police budget is cut in half. That doesn't mean we cut public safety in half. In fact, we will enhance public safety by taking away many functions that the police should not be performing. The police should not be responding to non-criminal emergency calls. For example, many advocates in Oakland and San Francisco for years have studied this, and they have recognized that actually the entire 911 response to non-criminal emergency calls should be moved to community responders who are social workers, people who have experience in the community, people from the marginalized communities themselves, being paid living wages, having unionized jobs in the public sector. They should be responding. That it's not the job of the police to go with their guns and their other weapons into people's homes or into people's neighborhoods. And as I said this morning, our movement is absolutely pushing for the Amazon tax that our movement has brought forward, that has been co-sponsored by Councilmember Morales. So I'm happy that she has joined us in this, and that so now this is the Sawant Morales Amazon tax. It is not just the Sawant tax; it is Sawant Morales Amazon tax that represents the will of the movement. And what are we demanding? We're demanding at least $500 million per year on big businesses to address racist gentrification, to fund social housing, jobs, and the Green New Deal. So at this point, I hope Nick Jones from my office is sharing the document that we prepared for public comment talking points. I'm basically going over that. So if people who are watching this want to go over that alongside what I'm saying, I think that will be extremely helpful. So the main discussion today is going to be the new proposal from Councilmember Mosqueda that will be discussed by the City Council today. And it is a very positive sign, because the fact that this proposal has been brought forward is absolutely 100% because of the pressure from the movement. It shows our movement is winning. And what's interesting about this bill that she has brought forward is that it is a deal that she has made with big business. And this particularly shows that our movement is winning, because big business and the wealthy, who have been fighting tooth and nail against our Amazon tax, are being forced to concede the power of the movement. So in that sense, it's extremely important that we recognize our own success, the success of our grassroots movement, filled with thousands of ordinary people. We don't have the power that the establishment has, but we have the power of the people, and that's what's forcing this proposal. Unfortunately, I would be lying to you if I did not recognize that the Mosqueda proposal falls far short of what working people, and especially Black and brown communities, need in this deeply unequal city, this city that has the nation's most regressive tax system. It is so much smaller than our Amazon tax that it would raise less than half of the money that our legislation would raise. It's hard for me to accept that there will be politicians who say there's a pandemic, there's a recession, we need to follow the Black community, we need to address racism, and then put forward a proposal that is literally less than half of the proposal that's already on the table. So that's one point. The other point is, and this is quite outrageous in my view, that the bill from Mosqueda has a sunset clause, meaning the tax on big businesses would expire after 10 years. In other words, right now, the status quo is Seattle has the nation's most regressive tax system. It has the nation's best tax haven for the rich and powerful. So what this bill is saying is that if it passes, then after 10 years, we go back to as if this is what we have right now is such a great situation for most of us. So the bill is saying it will go back to that. Well, I don't accept that. If there is anything that needs a sunset clause, it is what we have today, the status quo. Police brutality needs to sunset and end. We need an end to regressive taxation, and we need a permanently progressive taxes like the Amazon tax. I think it's also important to explain why it is that many Democratic Party politicians, even though they might be well-meaning, they will not join our movement. We have politicians like Mosqueda saying that they want progressive taxation, and I think she really does. But then the question is, why not support? If you say you want to address this problem, then why not support the Sawant Morales Amazon tax? Because it's not an isolated thing. There's huge support for the Amazon tax from ordinary people. So why, when there is such a huge crisis, why, when there is huge support for Amazon tax, should people politicians who call themselves progressive, why should they put forward a proposal that is so much less significant than what we have put forward? I think the reason is that, and this is the problem with establishment politics, is that even though there might be somewhat well-meaning officials. Ultimately, they base themselves on making deals with big business and the most conservative sections of labor leadership, rather than what I do and what our movement is doing, which is fighting alongside ordinary people and marginalized communities and the most progressive labor unions. That's the problem, and I think that's why that falls apart. And if I had used that approach that Councilmember Mosqueda is using, frankly, we would not have won the ban on Monday on chemical weapons and on chokeholds. We would not have won the $15 minimum wage. We would not have won the whole host of renters' rights that we have won. And we would not be at a point where big business is forced to concede a tax on big business. We would not be at this point if I had used that same approach. That we need that to be crystal clear. We need more elected representatives like my office, where we are unambiguously standing with working people and really fighting hard, which then forces the same big business who fight against us to then make concessions. But they don't make concessions because I talked to them nicely or something like that. And I should say, I was quite struck by the fact that the press conference yesterday from Councilmember Mosqueda included business owners like Ethan Stowell. I mean, Ethan Stowell was one of the big business owners who viciously opposed Seattle's $15 minimum wage in 2014. He was part of all kinds of chamber statements, lawsuits against 15 and so on. And then again in 2018, he viciously opposed the Amazon tax that was then later repealed by the council, unfortunately, which again, I should mention Councilmember Mosqueda voted with me against a repeal, which I appreciate. But this is a problem. You cannot make deals with the people who are against us and then expect that we are going to get results that are for us. That's a basic thing that a 5-year-old could tell you. That doesn't work. And so that's why, regardless of what people may disagree with, with our approach, what we do is use an honest approach where we don't make backroom deals with wealthy and influential. And we've seen that it doesn't work. As I said, that approach was tried in 2018, and then what happened? That Amazon tax was repealed. That was a historic betrayal of working people. And on the other hand, look at the incredible support for the Amazon tax. I mean, we have seen in the last 15 days incredible support for the Amazon tax. In addition to what we have seen in the movement. In the last many weeks, we have had the Seattle Education Association, UAW 4121, WFC 1488, all the unions that are representing public school educators and University of Washington workers. They have passed strong resolutions endorsing our Amazon tax. Just last night, the 43rd Legislative Districts of the Democratic Party passed a resolution endorsing the Amazon tax. They are joining the 32nd LD that has already done it, and the King County Democrats. More than 20 progressive organizations, unions, and small businesses, including small businesses, have endorsed our tax. So there is so much desire to fight for the strong Amazon tax. So the question we have to ask council members like Mosqueda is, well, we appreciate that you're bringing forward a proposal that is better than nothing, but why tie yourself to the same corporate entities who are deeply opposed to progressive policies? Why not stand with us? Yesterday in the press conference, Councilmember Mosqueda said she is interested in hearing Amazon's feedback. She said, quote, "My door is going to be open to hearing feedback," unquote. I find this quite striking because Jeff Bezos just attempted a hostile takeover of our city council only last year. He bullied the city into repealing the tax in 2018. I don't agree with wanting to hear Amazon's feedback. We've heard their opinions loud and clear. They basically went to war against our city. That's how clearly we know where they stand. The question is, are politicians going to listen to the feedback of working people instead of the billionaire class? That's the question. I had a couple of other things also just to clarify in terms of what the points that are being made by this proposal, which I think are quite misleading. But I will wait on that, and we should have Emily and other speakers speak, and then I will come back to sort of finish the clarification.
All right, thank you so much, Shama, for providing that really clear kind of overview of what were both the strength of this movement at this point, but then also some of the things we're up against. And yet, it's really critical to understand that without this movement, we would not have gotten to this There have been many, many points where, whether it was the Amazon's attempt to buy the elections and kick our movement out of City Hall, or the attempt, it seems like a long time ago, but to literally ban our Tax Amazon movement in Olympia. After we overcame that, we saw all of the shenanigans at City Hall to take the movement out of the driver's seat, to not let Shama chair the committee, which would be discussing the Amazon tax, and in fact channel that into a committee chaired by Councilmember Mosqueda. And of course, we now see, on the strength of this mass movement that's emerged, which again does include tens of thousands of people signing on to Tax Amazon, to build social housing, to provide community needs. Without this movement, we wouldn't be where we are right now. And it's precisely during these budget committee discussions when we should really lean on the strength of that movement, focus our movement on the point of attack to win as much as we possibly can. Let's go ahead and hear now from Emily MacArthur, who, like hundreds of people, have been in this movement every step of the way, can clearly articulate why we need this Amazon tax, but then also how our movement come together to discuss and then ultimately figure out the best way to apply our pressure to win as much as possible from big business for ordinary people. So Emily, if you could take it from here and fill us in on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adam. And of course, thank you so much, Shama, especially for bringing this legislation, which, has been just absolutely more necessary every step of every passing day. It's more clear how necessary it is to tax big business, to invest in our communities. And yeah, I have been part of the Tax Amazon movement since I'd say 2018. And, that movement has participated in marches, in rallies, in occupations of City Hall, lots and lots of tactics. And I just want to say that this tactic, that what we should be doing is having backroom discussions with big business. It's not a new revelation, right? It's being treated as this insight of, oh, if only we talked nicely. But of course, that has been the strategy for decades. And that is how we've gotten to the rotten, regressive tax base that we currently have, is an approach in which we try to make compromises with big business. And we say that we need shareholders at the table. And we pretend as though Amazon's voice is as relevant or as they somehow have the same amount of power as just like a working class person. The reality is that we've had to organize hundreds of working class people to even get this majority of the Democrats on the council to listen to us. And we are at that point. And I am not going back to the old strategies in which we lock the movement outside and we have patient conversations with big business about what maybe they would allow. I've also, in addition to the marches and rallies that we were able to have for the Tax Amazon movement, I've been at the Justice for George Floyd rallies. Of course, there have been not only the encampment but also marches, and I've talked to lots of people about what is the next step for this demand. And unshockingly, for Black Lives to Matter, it means that we have to invest in our communities. And I think lots of folks have been raising this demand of cutting the police budget in half, and I support that demand. But the reality is, $200 million is not enough. It's not enough just to take it from the police budget, and it's not going to be enough of the $200 million from Teresa Mosqueda's proposed bill. I think we have an opportunity to really win a massive investment. We should take that $200 million from the police budget, and we should also get this $500 million from the Sawant Morales bill. Investing meaningfully in our communities. And I will circle back to say there is also some important clarity of the way in which the money is being invested for Shama's bill. Really clearly investing it in housing, really clearly talking about immediate cash payments to families. I think the thing that's really, really shocking to me, having looked over the articles that have come out about Mosqueda's bill, is not only is it less than half, but it seeks to spread the money over more places. Any working class person who has to operate on a limited budget knows that you can't take less money and make it go further. That's just a recipe for disaster. And I think that, on Monday, as Shama said, we saw the effectiveness of this approach of calling out the delays that the council members were trying to put forward. Lisa Herbold very shamefully was trying to delay the vote as though, we could wait another week or another month of attacks on our communities, of people having tear gas seeping in through their windows when they're not even at the protest, right? They're just at home trying to relax, maybe even quarantining because they're an at-risk community for the COVID-19. our movement was able to fight back against that because we were organized and we were militant and we were really clear about what role the council members that were bringing these delays were playing. We also were able to win this victory over what was presented as a very neutral amendment, right? And this is something the establishment consistently will do, that they'll introduce something as though they're trying to just clarify, and they'll use a very patient and very decorous voice. But in reality, what their amendments are seeking to do is to water down our battle. And so we have to be consistently present and consistently clear on what's happening. And, you know, I think just like the amendment from Herbold on Monday was trying to, blow a giant loophole, which said, oh, well, we can still own tear gas and flashbangs, but we just won't use them for crowd control. That was a distraction. It was a major attack on our movement. This new tax that is has a sunset clause, is trying to spend less money in more places. It is a distraction and is not a clarification or a more effective or smart approach. So, you know, I think the movement needs to recognize that it's only coming forward because of our strength, but we can push it to the side and not accept it because it is a distraction. And I do actually really want to dig into the sunset clause, because to me, this is one of the most heinous aspects of Mosqueda's proposal. We don't see a sunset on tax breaks for the rich. We don't see a sunset on corporate subsidies. We don't see a sunset on the refusal to invest in our communities. When is the sunset on the absolute crisis of affordable housing? When is the sunset on the refusal to get actively in front of investing in infrastructure like the West Seattle Bridge? I haven't seen that sunset, and our movement is going to have to fight for that sunset. And that, I think, is the really exciting upwelling of our movement, is that we are demanding an end to the status quo, a sunset on the status quo, as Shama put it, and fighting for a massive investment. Of course, also as a start, over 10,000 units of affordable housing being built. And yeah, I look forward to the folks who are watching this today getting fired up, because I know on Monday, when we had over 150 people signed up for public comment, and again, they spoke with almost one voice in saying, you either vote for this or we come for you. I think it's a real clarity amongst working class people that not only is big business not our friend, but the Democratic Party establishment that would wring their hands and say, oh, we just need to go through this process and talk to the right people. Those are not our friends either. And so, I think this movement has been through a lot of battles, which Adam also outlined, of course. Not only did we have to endure the lies and slander from the No Tax on Jobs movement, which pushed the council and made them feel like they had to repeal our movement in 2018. We've then kept up the fight because we're persistent and brave, and we know what is necessary, which is investment in our communities, taking money from the richest man in the world, the richest corporation in the world that makes its mega profits off of paying poverty wages to a majority immigrant, majority Black and brown workforce. I look forward to speaking with that same singular voice, that same absolutely necessary clarity today to demand what our communities need, which is a massive investment, $500 million a year, paid for by taxing big business with no sunset clause, and invested directly in affordable housing. So thanks everyone for being out today.
Thank you so much, Emily, for bringing that insight, directly from the movement. And again, there's literally thousands of people throughout the city who have been participating in this Tax Amazon movement, not just this year, but for years now, since, of course, it was won in 2018 and then scandalously repealed just weeks after that by a city council, completely capitulating to the bullying of big business and of Jeff Bezos. Let's go ahead and move to another person who has also been in this Tax Amazon movement from the very start, Logan Swan, who's a construction worker, unionized, who's been a part of this Tax Amazon movement. Let's go ahead and hear from Logan about the pressure this movement can bring to bear, but also about things going on outside of this budget committee in this movement. Go ahead, Logan.
Hi, my name is Logan Swan. I'm a rank and file journeyman iron worker, union iron worker out of Local 86. yeah, I'm definitely in support of the Tax Amazon campaign, and yeah, I've been involved in organizing with it since 2018. Um, yeah, I mean this tax on big business would create, would generate $500 million a year that would be spent on a jobs program, essentially creating, in the first 10 years, 10,000 union wage paying jobs in the building trades. And, we would be put to work actually building what our community needs. I've been building luxury condos, luxury apartments, luxury hotels, all things that nobody I know can afford for years now. And, I think it shows, right, that 1 out of 10 Seattle homes is empty, but we have a housing crisis. And that's not because there's not enough housing. Obviously, it's because, when I go and build these luxury units, they're being built for the profits of private developers, and not based on not being built for human need. And so having an option, a public option, essentially, of building, housing that's the purpose is to house people instead of the purpose being to enrich a few private individuals, is exactly what's needed. And yeah, there's been a number of building trades union members and members of the labor movement from across the public and private sector unions that have been fighting for this campaign. With unions endorsing it like UAW and SEA. And yeah, I mean, we're not going to let up, right? Because this is what our community needs. And that's the role of our organizations, right? Our labor unions. Our historic task is not just to be concerned about, what contract I work under. It's the quality of life and the working conditions of every one of my sisters and brothers, union or non-union. And yeah, I think that kind of brings me to the next point. It's super exciting what our movement against police brutality and the movement for justice for George Floyd was able to win on Monday with the ban on chemical weapons. But the fight isn't over, right? We're combating, a legacy of systemic racism that, spans the entire history of this country. And, that's also a task of the labor movement, organized labor. My union represents, workers from places all over the world, workers who are Black, who are brown, who are white. It's our task to defend the rights of every worker. And, that applies to any union. And, that's why there's been dozens of rank and file members like myself who have been organizing to call, around the demand to remove the Seattle Police Officers Guild from the Martin Luther King County Labor Council. And we're putting on an event today from 4:30 to 7:30. It's going to be out of Cal Anderson Park, and supporting the call for that, and and the demands to combat police brutality, systemic racism, and part of that, to the gentrification that we've witnessed in Seattle with, communities and districts like the Central District just being swept away with a tide of corporate money and no accountability to the communities that live there. If we look at our unions having the task of looking out for every worker, that's not compatible with an organization that's been defending the officers who have been murdering our brothers and sisters.
All right. Thank you so much, Logan, for bringing in one of the other, another of the critical demands of this movement, that the Seattle Police Officers Guild be kicked out of the Labor Council. And of course, that highlights the fact that, this social explosion that has erupted around the Black Lives Matter and Justice for George Floyd movement has several critical demands. We know that the demands to not charge people arrested, during these protests is a critical one. Of course, we've already mentioned the fact that this, historic victory, to my knowledge, the first in the country of banning of chemical weapons, which of course should be absurd because the United Nations already bans it in situations of war. But nonetheless, city after city all across the country. I saw a New York Times headline. They said 98 cities across the country have used tear gas and other chemical weapons on their own populations. We were able to ban that in a real way just yesterday. A lot of people I know are interested in this budget process this year precisely because of the huge demand to defund the Seattle Police Department by at least 50%. That's going to be a part of the budget discussions today. However, as Councilmember, as Shama mentioned earlier on, that's going to be the focus of the part of the budget discussions, which begins at 2 p.m. To that end, we're having another one of these watch parties that starts at 1 p.m., or I guess you can call them pre-watch parties. And we're going to have a whole, similar to how, we've kind of laid out some of the ideas and the talking points around the Amazon tax and how to most effectively fight for the biggest Amazon tax using the force of the movement. We're going to do the same thing with the defund starting at 1 p.m. Although it is worth noting that there will not be votes on the defund demand right now. It's going to be a discussion, but of course it is critical every step of the way for the movement to be discussing that. And so folks who are watching right now should please, if possible, rejoin at 1 p.m. And there's going to be, you got to sign up again for public comment at noon. Of course, we know that these processes are not easy, but that's precisely why as a movement we need to help each other out and walk each other through these steps. Before I go back to Councilmember Sawant for some more political contextualization and more prep, I want to also alert people to another important event. Every year we've done the people's budget. From the first year that we took office, that Shama was elected into office, we've done a people's budget. We are planning to have a people's budget town hall this Thursday, June 25th at 6 p.m. So if people want to note that on their calendars, then that's that'll be really wonderful. We of course need to build this movement around the defund the SPD demand. We need to build the movement for the biggest Amazon tax, but there's also many other things that we can fight for and win, like millions to expand tiny house villages in the city, like the critical demand to transfer the East Precinct to be a community center, potentially with affordable housing, and that's community led. So there's a lot of things that our movement needs to come together to discuss. That said, we are 15 minutes away from the 10 a.m. Budget Committee meeting right now, wherein these demands to tax Amazon is going to be first and foremost. And so, Councilmember Sawant, I believe you had some more stuff to add on that. I'll let you take that right now.
Thanks, Adam, and thank you, Emily and Logan, for speaking, and for everybody who's watching. So I think Adam briefly answered the questions, but I just want to be clear. There's a question that came on the live stream that said, will council be voting on defund in that afternoon meeting? No, they won't be voting on defund. In fact, my expectation is that it will be quite a sort of it won't be a substantive conversation even. So our public comment has to be strong. And since we want to focus our public comment on defund police for that afternoon session, I would really echo what Adam just said this morning at 9. Get on this live stream at 1 p.m. and we'll go over our points in detail on defund. We don't have enough time to focus both on tax Amazon and defund. So let's focus on tax Amazon this morning. Let's focus on defund this afternoon. Our movement is fighting hard for both. They both go together. Addressing police brutality and addressing gentrification go together in the fight against racism. So we will talk more about that at 1 p.m. So please join us. It's going to be our community meeting at 1 p.m. I promise you it's going to be far more exciting than the council meeting itself. And our community meeting at 1 p.m. will prepare everyone for public comment at 2 p.m. So you should sign up. So the things people should do is, at 10 a.m., speak in public comment for Tax Amazon. At 12 noon, sign up for Defund public comment. At 1 p.m., join us for the community meeting on Defund on this same live stream. We have a question here. Affordable housing is not the same as low-income housing. What will be done for low-income housing? And what percentage of the median income would these houses be affordable to? So I can say very confidently, our Amazon tax is strong. It would raise $500 million every year and immediately begin it will begin Green New Deal renovations of existing working class homes. It will create jobs through that, and that will address the racial inequality as well. But as far as the housing is concerned, the social housing in the Amazon tax will be prioritizing people who are extremely low income, people who are already facing homelessness. It will prioritize what's called permanent supportive housing, meaning housing that comes with case management services and things that, the other wraparound services that people who are facing extreme situations need to shore up their lives. So absolutely, the housing will be prioritized for the people who need the most. But because the tax is a strong tax, the housing will also the tax will also create housing for people like Logan described. So many of his co-workers, you would think construction workers, iron workers, public school educators, these people would make enough money to live in the city. Well, they don't. That's how bad the rents are, and that's how much workers are being exploited. And that's why we need to make sure that we have housing for all working people, but prioritizing housing for very low income people. The problem with the Mosqueda proposal is that it has no funding for Green New Deal at all. So that's a huge problem there. But on top of that, because it will raise less than half of what we are saying we need to raise through big business taxes. Imagine how much less housing they're going to build. So rather than actually make a dent in the housing affordability and homelessness crisis that we're talking about and gentrification crisis that we're talking about, that proposal would actually not make a dent. But at the same time, the fact that that proposal even exists is a sign that our movement is working. So our job is to not to let up and say, oh, thank you, council members, for bringing this. No, our job is to push for the Amazon tax right now. And just to say one thing I wanted to add, in the press conference that Councilmember Mosqueda did yesterday, this guy, Ethan Stowell, who's the business owner who viciously opposed $15 an hour and the Amazon tax in 2018, he repeated this right-wing talking point, which is a total lie, which is that our Amazon tax, he said that it would be massively regressive to mid-sized businesses and low-wage workers. This is a complete lie, and I have to say I'm quite disappointed that Councilmember Mosqueda will align herself with a big business guy who has fought against pro-worker policies in the past and now again is repeating right-wing lies, right-wing talking points. This idea that our Amazon tax is regressive is complete nonsense. It is gaslighting working people. Actually, the tax is only on the largest 2% of the corporations, meaning not on the workers of the corporations. It's on the executives and the owners of those corporations. It does not apply to 98% of the smallest corporations, meaning the vast overwhelming majority of businesses are not going to pay. So it's not a tax on workers. It's not a tax on small businesses. It's not a tax on medium-sized businesses. It's not a tax on jobs. This is all lies. And these lies have been proven as lies by progressive economists. Progressive economists have completely rejected these ideas based on data. And furthermore, just to clarify, a corporation with a $7 million payroll, which is one of the largest corporations in our city, any corporation with a $7 million payroll is a huge corporation. Compare that corporation to a working family that is reeling under this pandemic recession. So really the question is, what are politicians going to do? Are they going to make working people pay for this crisis, for this pandemic recession? Or are they going to make Amazon and big businesses pay for this crisis? That's the question here. There's no confusion here. It's a question of which side you're on. There's nothing else to it. It's not complicated. So a company at a $7 million payroll threshold would pay just, wait for this, just $91,000 under our Amazon tax. For a giant corporation to pay just $91,000, in a city where they have underpaid taxes for decades. Come on, this is, so what's going on here is wealthy business owners like Stowell are totally gaslighting ordinary people. And unfortunately, by including him in the conversation, council members like Mosqueda are helping them with that. So we have to reject this. Ultimately, it's not about words by elected officials and politicians. It's about actions. So the question we have to ask is, why make a deal with hostile businesses when ordinary people are willing to fight? Why don't you work with ordinary people who are willing to fight to address our housing affordability crisis? So I think that should be the theme of our fight back for the largest possible tax. If we give up now, then they will not even pass what they are proposing now. So let's understand, bottom line, the only reason that other proposal exists is because we are fighting back and our movement is having a real impact. So make sure you give a strong public comment at 10 a.m. It's in a few minutes. And then join us at 1 p.m. when we will be going over defund points. And that's going to be exciting as well. So I look forward to seeing you again at 1 p.m. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shama. We know that you've got to get to the budget committee in just a few minutes, and really appreciate laying out just systematically, point by point, the arguments for why we need this big business tax, but also just the string of lies or distortions that we've heard again now for years. And a lot of us, on the call or watching will remember the fact that the opposition just repeated over and over that this is a tax on jobs, a tax on working people. And that's precisely why our movement has had that clarity to say this is an Amazon tax. This is a tax on the biggest businesses, the wealthiest businesses in Seattle, and in order to fund the needs of ordinary working people and their tens of thousands. Of course, the poorest, the 12,000 people who are experience the brunt in living on the streets, but far beyond that, also to ensure that we're building permanently affordable, high quality social housing, so that over the course of 10 years, we'll have 8,000 permanently affordable homes, so that baristas and nurses and teachers, and especially the communities of color, working people who have been systematically pushed out of the city, so that we can begin to make Seattle again a place where working people can live. We are about 6 minutes out away from the budget committee, which is going to start at 10 minutes. I know that Nick Jones, also a community organizer in Shama Sawan's office here, described how people can sign up for public comment. But I also understand that we're having some technical difficulties, and a lot of people couldn't hear the sound. So why don't we just take 1 or 2 minutes, and if Nick, you could explain once again how people can sign up for this public comment. It's not too late. It's not guaranteed, of course, that if you sign up at this point, you'll be able to give public comment. But at the same time, it is important that we demonstrate, that there's dozens and sometimes hundreds of people who are taking their time out at this odd hour on a weekday to make that public comment. So, Nick, if you're in a position to go ahead and unmute yourself and explain how people can sign up, go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. Here, let me share my screen real quick. So folks can hopefully see, you kind of need, there'll be a website you need to go to find the correct form, but yeah, Adam's absolutely correct. It's not too late. If folks are able to, it really can give a powerful impression that, yeah, there's dozens, hundreds of people in the room demanding accountability from the city council to pass what's right, into tax big business and Amazon for permanently affordable social housing. And really the best way to get to this page, because it is a little difficult to find at times, I just go up to the browser, type in Seattle public comment, and it should be the first thing up, no matter what browser you're using. And you'll see if it's a seattle.gov URL, should say council, committees, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead and click on that. It'll take you just to this page. There's a button as well if you're not able to speak to email all your council members. Folks, if you're unable to give verbal testimony, giving a written testimony is also can be quite powerful, to see hundreds of emails come in supporting the movement. So you'll see here some instructions about the specificities. of giving public comment. But most important is that you find this form at the bottom and fill it out completely. And it's of course important you put in your email address, phone number, email address. You'll get an email with all the specifics about how you'll be giving public comment. But the most important thing is to make sure you enter your phone number here that you want to be called on. The city council clerk will call whatever number you put in here. We'll call that so they can get you on the line to be able to, voice your opinion during the committee meeting today. So you'll see here it says select budget committee. That's the one happening very shortly. This page is also the page we'll use to sign up to give public comment at the 2 p.m. Committee meeting. And public comment for that starts again at 12 noon. Again, right at 12, if you just go up to your browser, type in Seattle public comment, click usually just on the first thing at the top of the page, and it should take you to this, and you should be able to sign up and get immediately on stack to voice your support for defunding the police at that later meeting. So that's about it. Hopefully folks can sign up, just even get your name on the register before we kind of go into the city council meeting here. And thanks everyone for being here and helping us build this movement.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much, Nick. And yeah, I want to thank the more than 100 people who took time out at 9 a.m. to be with our movement, to be together, to go over these arguments for why we need to tax big business, to build social housing, to fund Green New Deal programs. I want to reiterate, of course, as we've already stated, that the budget committee discussion to talk about the critical demand to defund the SPD by at least 50%. That's going to be at 2 p.m. So please join us at 1 p.m. for a similar type watch party where we can get some of the arguments of the movement, some of the experiences of the movement to begin to find out the best way to pressure council. Well, I know that there's a link in the chat for the people's budget coming up on June 25th at 6 p.m. where we'll have a far more developed articulation, bring in voices from the community, hear about these demands. And yeah, just want to thank everybody once again. Don't forget, in your public comment to identify yourself if you're from an organization, from a union. Thank council members Sawant and Morales for bringing this bill forward. And of course, bring your experience in the movement for why we need to tax big business to build social housing, for coronavirus relief, for Green New Deal programming. And of course, this is just one more step in the struggle, and we will see people as we go further. And it's really exciting that we've got this opportunity to potentially win hundreds of millions of dollars for ordinary people and provide a clear example throughout the country for not austerity, not making working people pay, but for making big business and the super rich who have the money pay for this crisis, and to begin to overcome the housing and the other failures of the capitalist system to provide an alternative. So thank you so much. Please hop on the Seattle channel right now and give that public comment for how we can fight and build this movement. Thank you so much, and we'll see you later.
Just want to double check. I don't see the link to public testimony yet.